Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm coming to you because I wanted to talk to you about respect. I saw it this weekend, and I said the story about I saw it with my mother, and I wanted to see it with my mother because this was the only concert my mother and I went to together, and I just thought it would be a really special moment if we saw this with each other. And it really was. I thoroughly enjoyed spending that time with her again. And I have to admit, there were moments in the movie that I became really emotional. And I don't know why I became as emotional as I did. And because I will admit that Aretha Franklin was one of the backdrops of my soundtracks of my life. But it was not, but she was not, I didn't grow up with, like, I didn't grow with her. And what's so interesting is that my mother had, because I was raised in Church of God in Christ, and my mother, even when she became saved and everything, and I'd go through her stuff as a kid, the albums that she kept was Aretha Franklin's, especially Aretha Franklin's gospel album. And she had um, Tina Turner and Shaka Khan. It's like the strangest, anyway, and that was it. And so I grew up, especially with Precious Lord and Amazing Grace. Those were my two, and my grandmother loved Aretha Franklin's Precious Lord. So I must say, like, there were moments I was just, and then halfway through, I was like, Jennifer Hudson, I mean, she's doing a great job, but this is not like stellar, Oscar worthy. And at the end, I was like, girl, you played this. I was actually about to text, like, good job, but not Oscar worthy. And then I changed my mind at the end. But honestly, the Oscar buzz who I think really should, Marlon Wayans. I was like, Marlon, like, you over trying, you trying hard. And then after a while, I was like, oh, Marlon. What made it is his voice transformation. Like, he really transformed, and he just took this role to a place that I was stunned, right? So I must tell you that it's not complete. I think a lot of the criticisms of this movie has been it doesn't tell us a lot about her life, and I'm like, but it's 2 hours, a little over 2 hours, and it even stops at the recording. Like, there's more life after that, So I mean, the recording was in the 80s, so I mean, we're talking about 30 years later. We haven't even, so it's there's a lot missing, and I think if you watch the series, you do not get as gifted of an actress, no shade, but you do get a more well-rounded story. And this movie, though, I think does a better job at trying to structure the relationship between the father and Aretha. And I think that Aretha and her father uh, definitely, I don't know, it made a softer relationship between the two. And whereas in the series, the relationship between Aretha and her father was definitely not as soft, and it was much more critical of her father. And I think I would like to pass judgment. I really would. But there's about the father and having Aretha being clearly sexually assaulted as a young girl. I would like to have harsh criticisms on how do you let this happen to your daughter? Like, explain this to me. Not okay. You want to get away with it the first time, fine, but the second time, dude, what are you doing? And so there's a lot of unaccountability, and it really made that series really made Franklin look like a very poor individual. What just in many ways. And I felt that uh part of the problem that I have with that, with I I want to hold judgment, and I may have held judgment in that other in the other video, but the only reason why a part of me doesn't hold as much judgment, because I continue to process this, is because um I grew up in a church where they began to try to marry people off. If you came to the church single, they try to marry you off as soon as possible because they think that if you don't get married within the church, even if you don't love the dude, uh, and even if he doesn't love you, the woman, as long as you guys get married so quickly that it'll save you from being a sinful person. So if you cheat on your wife, then at least you you could backslide and you are still more prone to come back into the church. So this whole we're hurrying up and getting you married thing is supposed to help make this better. Whereas in my mind, and then so when I graduated from high school at 16. And as soon as I graduated from high school at 16, the mother, the pastor's wife was like, "So when are we getting married?" It's like, "Dear ma'am, I'm going to college." And she's like, "Okay." So then as soon as I graduated from college, it was like, "So you graduated from college at 20. So when are you getting married?" Because the longer you stay unwed, the longer they're like, "Okay, you out there sinning." And so um which is funny because then the irony is they're teaching you abstinence. So that abstinence preach clearly is something that they think that a single person is unable to do because they want to hurry and get you married. The hypocrisy is alarming. So with all that being said, the church, because all of them, some of them, the people I grew up in the church with, the mothers, they're like 100, they're 90, they're 80 and up, and they're still alive, and they're 80 to 100 years old, and all of them, their church was their life. Like, they didn't go to the movies, they didn't go to concerts, everything was related to the church. I go to church for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday noonday prayer. I go Tuesday for Bible study. I go Friday for evening service. I go Saturday for rehearsal. I go Sunday all day, and then maybe there's if they had like and they people they would do like get-togethers throughout the week. So their social structure, the center of their life was church. And that's how Black community out of slavery started. And these people were they're, like I said, they're 80 to 100 years old. The church was their center. And so I watch Aretha, and my judgment's like, you guys are hanging out and and drinking and whatever, and it's like, okay, yes, that's all sinful, I get it. But at the same token, I also get the flip side because you party with them on, because the idea is like if you hang out with them on Friday, you all go to church. I mean, you guys are all in this center of life. And now, should you be having sex with like a 10-year-old? No. Should you be having sex with like a 12-year-old? Absolutely not. But at the same token, it's not enough to shun someone out in the same way if you're created in this bubble. Now, I will also on the flip side say, like, it depends on the community that you're raised in too. Because, like, in my mom's community, they kind of go away and then they come back and this is your sister. Right. And so I get all of that. But my grandmother was married at 16. And, so getting married at a young age and is kind of, that 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 array. I will say what's so interesting about the Jennifer Hudson movie is when she said she was 25 with her first hit, like the real hit, and I think that was like 9 albums in, or 10. This is her 10th album with a hit, and she's 25. I was like, woo, you are old looking 25. And I think that's an interesting caveat. Like they real Jennifer Hudson, no shade, but the way that they made her look, I was like, when they said that, I was like, hmm, hmm, hmm. And I think they did this intentionally. Like in the series, they made sure for you to, they put the ages there kind of for you to be aware. She's 16, she's 14, she's 10 with this kid, she's 12 with another one. So they want you to kind of tap the age, whereas in this one they don't do enough of that. So then you almost forget that by the time that she's like 25, she got 3 kids under uh under the age of, well, her youngest, her oldest is about 14, and they don't make they don't yeah, 12 to 14. And in the movie they made them, when she comes back with the baby and she's 25, they don't make that, they make the kids look younger, so then you forget that she was so young when she had the baby. So I think that they're trying to smooth over this controversy, because she never says who the fathers are, trying to smooth over this controversy of having these 2 babies at a very young age. So other than that, I think it was a wonderful movie. I walked out, my mother walked out loving it. I walked out, loving it. My kids were like, what time is this over? So the music didn't stir their soul. So just to let you know, that don't look for the stirring of the soul, for some folks. Um, I think I have time. I also want to talk about, just for a second, I want to talk about Untold, which is on Netflix. And Untold is has 2 episodes right now. And the first episode is about the is about Detroit. Detroit is that Detroit versus let me pull it up because I'm keep saying and I don't like saying that. Is that first, okay, let me, Malice at the Palace. It's the brawl between our dear friends, um, the Pacers versus uh, Detroit. And I'm going to put that I am an NBA. I was raised watching the NBA consistently, and this happened in 2004. And I don't watch as much NBA now that I used to then. And there's a lot of reasons. Part of it is I don't like the the fact that it's not as physical now. But that gets to this point. I um if you watch Malice at the Palace, I'm angry. It does make me angry, and I will remember even making comments. Okay, this puts me in a context because my uncles were raised in Indiana. I've said this. And when they used to play, people would throw stuff at them, call them names, call them the N word. You know, that's what they would do. And they couldn't respond. And part of that, I can't respond, is because, you may die. They may come to your house. They may, attack you. In some places, they had to run to the bus in order to protect themselves from being, physically harmed. I get that. But we are, but this is 2004, and I still feel like in 2004, there needs to be a greater level of respect for professional athletes. And I remember watching this live. So my uncles and I went a little back and forth because they were like, at the end of the day, they can't go into the stands. Like, this was their stance. You cannot go into the stands. And my thing was, I get your perspective because there is a level of professionalism, and it's not professional to pick up and go into the stands and, let's duke it out. I get that, and I am all there for that. But the problem that I had with it is I forgot that this was, I forgot the context. I will admit to that. I did not forget that David Stern was trying to turn an image already of the league. There was, because this was happening in the early 90s, when when the league was in the 80s and definitely in the early 90s, when the league was becoming increasingly less white. So in the 80s, it was no longer as white. And then the last great white hope was Larry Bird. And then you'd have white players like John Stockton. And the league kept propping up these white players thinking that they were going to be as good as Larry Bird. When I'm gonna let you know right now, I mean, the infamous Isaiah Thomas saying, if he was just a black player, he'd just be any old Joe, but because he's white, he's a big deal. Let me explain. Most black people felt that way. I mean, even though, it was blasphemous to say Larry Bird was a decent player. A decent player. Not say good, but a decent player. Now, in 2020, you can go ahead, 2021, I know, you can say he's a great player. But back then, and I live in California, I live in LA, there was no way you were going to be able to get away with saying that Larry Bird was a great player. Like, zero possibility, because this is Magic Town. Like, especially in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, there's no way you could get away with saying that. So my point is, Isaiah Thomas, and let's be clear, Isaiah Thomas has paid the price for saying what he said. And that's just, it is what it is. We can slice it, dice it, There's other things that he's done, but that is one of the things that made him uh not the favorite, and Dumar more of the favorite, because Joe Dumar had a better temperament. Joe Dumar's people weren't thugs, quote unquote, right? They weren't from the hood, even though he was, didn't have the greatest upbringing as well, but he had this great father. I mean, anywho, Isaiah Tom, and then you got to remember that David Stern was trying to remake the league over. He was trying to get rid of the bad boys, and he moved over into Grant Hill was going to be the look. We're not going to call it the Pistons anymore. We're going to, have this newer look. And then after a while, Detroit was like, dude, what are we doing? Let's get back to old Detroit. And they went back to old Detroit. Like, we're not going to remake art. So it's this constant, David was trying to make the league more palatable. So even, and this is where I halt criticism. I push back against criticism against Michael Jordan. I'm not even a big Michael Jordan person. When he was playing, I admired his play, but I was always rooting for the Knicks, Patrick Ewing. Anyway, the point is, I understood that. This is why I push against the criticism against Michael Jordan, is because the league, David, was willing to toss even Michael Jordan to the side, because they wanted the next white thing, which was Kukoc, which was Paxson, which was, they wanted, especially Kukoc, they really wanted to bank the notion that Michael Jordan was the person, the entity that made the NBA what it was, and not Larry Bird, clearly was a seething issue. Now, and the thing is that Michael Jordan was palatable, but Michael Jordan at any given day, he will remind you, I am that dude. I am black. Even though he wouldn't openly say that I'm black in the same way that, Allen Iverson would, or whatever. And Michael Jordan played like street ball, which was more black. So you got to remember, like, everything about the league in the 90s was a tension between this. It's not just that you're admitting more black people, but the game was changing. It was changing to be more black, more physical, more street, more of what David did not think would be selling to a white crowd. So when you had that incident, Malice at the Palace, it was the epitome of, these are thugs that we're letting in. It was racist, but David was already racist and I don't care if he's dead. And we can say his positive is that he did take the NBA to the league to where it is, and he did usher that in. But he didn't do it by himself. He did it on the backs of Michael Jordan. He did it on the backs of this dream team. And the fact that you have Larry Bird on the dream team, when his back, you needed that white dude, John Stockton and Larry Bird. And I mean, granted, I don't like Karl Malone, so we push that to the side. But you did this because you couldn't have that all black team going to the dream team. Even though you can, are we going to say that Isaiah Thomas is Are we gonna say that John Stockton is better than Isaiah? Is that what we're gonna do? No, we're not gonna say that. But we know what it is, and we also know that Michael Jordan didn't like Isaiah Thomas. The point being, and I get it. We can talk about the team jail, positions playing, all that other stuff, and it would have brought more attention. But at the end of the day, this is what David was trying to push. So when you see this movie, this Untold, which is fabulous, my heart broke for a few people. Reggie Miller, who deserved a ring, and Jermaine O'Neal. Clearly, Jermaine O'Neal still has, in the back of his throat, he's still upset, which he is. And Steven Jackson, which is my dude. Steven Jackson was real upset. He's like thinking about how much money we lost. And the thing that sucks is you're working for a league that, yeah, the fans in the seat matter. I get it. But you're working for a league that absolutely doesn't give 2 cents about the players. And that is the legacy of LeBron James. Because LeBron James, but it's not just LeBron James, but LeBron James wouldn't be able to do what he's able to do and along with others, Paul, Chris Paul and stuff. They wouldn't be able to do what they're doing if it wasn't for the Michael Jordans and the Magic Johnsons, who became, even if it was a 2% owner, which let's not go into that story. But their ownership, the fact that they had ownership of the team and the diversification of the ownership, even though it's still largely white, but the fact that the front office is more diverse now than it was in the 90s, in early 2000s. The fact that there's a level of diversity, and we can, and don't get me wrong, more work needs to be done in the NBA when it comes to giving opportunities for coaches and stuff, like for former black athletes to become coaches, head coaches, because there was problems there. And in the front office and in ownership, there's more that can be done. But who began to start busting open the door becomes, there were a few, but where I'm not even going to, the Bill Russells, the Michael Jordans, the Magic Johnsons, all of these older players set the tone that allows the LeBron James and the Chris Paul to kind of be able, not to kind of, but to be able to do what they're able to do and voice their, what they want to say, what they're, what the players want to say, represent them, know that they have more. Doc Rivers, they have more of an influence now in how things are being done. And that didn't happen overnight, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Go watch both of these. Go watch Respect. You can only see it in theaters. And then on Netflix, go watch Untold. I'm gonna have to talk about the next Untold next week. Have a great week.